9 o'clock news and views right here on Salam Media. A very big warm welcome to our Polokwane listeners and viewers on One Nation FM. Next online is Dr. Dick Forslund. He is a senior economist. We're going to be talking to him about the unemployment rate, which continues to decline. But before we get there, I need to put a very important question to him regarding the strike action today in South Africa. Dr. Dick Forslund, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you here. My previous guest was a political analyst. We were talking about strike action today in South Africa. He indicated that the trade unions are in bed with the ruling party, not very happy with the trade unions' role currently. But that being said, he still believes that it's a good idea that workers take to the streets in their droves to strike against high cost of living in South Africa. Your thoughts as an economist, is this good or bad for the country?
I think it is good for the for the country, and when it comes to being in bed with the ruling party, well, it's true for the COSATU, which is one federation who is on strike today, but the other federation is, as you know, SAFTU, and they are
Yes.
definitely not in bed with the government. But I mean, as for COSATU, which is coming up in the Congress now in September, I mean, they should really consider who they are in bed with. And I mean, I saw an interview with Svelensima Vavi of SAFTU, and he noted that
COSATU.
no, he's the general secretary of SAFTU,
Oh,
Svelensima
okay.
Vavi.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah. And he noted that the interviewer asked him, "Will there be any result of this?" And he said, "No, there will be no result." Uh, but politically, well, I mean, economically, there will be no change in policy and so on. But when it comes to the wider goal of this is to have people coming together, and to me, I mean, what is on the agenda, what should be on the agenda, that is for COSATU to break all ties with the ruling party, and they should consider to go together with the other unions to form their own party and try to stand in election. I mean, that's the only sustainable way of changing economic policy. And if people, and to do that, then people have to come together and they have to march together and feel that they are really in the same boat, even if they are different federations. And we saw this also when it came to the strike against Sibanye Gold some months ago. That NUM and AMCO, these arch enemies, they came
Mm.
together, and there were no violence and no killings in this strike. And they are continuing to negotiate together now in the platinum industry. And that is kind of like what I see as a green sprout politically in South Africa today. Otherwise, it's not so much to be happy about.
Okay, so Zwelinzima Vavi broke away from COSATU. He has joined SAFTU. They both going out on the strike action today. Do you believe it's going to make any difference at all? The workers, we've been told that no work, no pay for them today. How does that make a dent in the economy today? Stay away.
Well, that is always the case by strikes. The workers always have to make sacrifices to participate in strikes, and I mean, in South Africa, strikes can go on for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But I think that people also do it as a matter of dignity, to sort of to put down their foot, and then they are also providing a higher wage level, even if they themselves are losing out, and they can only enjoy the wage increase they can achieve 1 year or two years from now. I mean, the net loss will then be recovered in 1 or 2 years. But those who are the young people, or those who are newly employed in such a industry where there've been such a strike, they of course enter into a much higher level, and that is how working class conditions has been improved historically. So this generation sacrifice something, and then the next generations enter into the economy at the higher and more sort of sustainable level for their families. So
So
that is
some
how I think you have to see on look upon this.
Okay, so sacrifices are being made from one generation to the next.
Yeah.
Let's let's look at the issue around the South African employment rate. Currently, Stats South Africa have put out some figures, and how is it looking for us here in South Africa? And they are also talking about a record high of unemployment hitting 35.3% in the fourth quarter of 2021. Explain all of that. How do we as lay people understand what exactly is being said by Stats South Africa?
Well, there are many issues here and issues also behind the numbers. And I, in fact, prepared for this interview also by having sort of a short talk with Dr. Pali Lehochla, who was the former, he was the Director General of Stats SA until recently. So, firstly, you can see a slight dip in the official unemployment rate. I mean, by half a percentage point or something like that. In actual numbers, the number of employees, beside the percentage points, the number of employees increased to by 132,000 people in the official account. But as AIDC and I mean many observers who look at the employment rate, we are using the so-called expanded definition of the unemployment, because in the official unemployment rate, they regard those who have given up to look for jobs as out of the labor force. But if you include them in the unemployment, so that if people would believe that there would be any use of trying to look for a job and not giving up, well, then the unemployment rate is presently
You.
44.6% across the
Mhm.
economy. So that is kind of like one issue. And I must belabor this with some more notes here. When they ask the question for the reference week, the question is, have you worked for at least 1 hour during the past week? So the issue is kind of if you have worked for 1 hour. And this, that's quite a timid question, isn't it?
It's very
Uh,
misleading, is it not?
yeah. The second thing is, so what is work then here? Well, if I go down and I haven't practiced on my violin now for many years, but if I take my violin and go down to the robot here nearby and play for 1 hour, and some people are giving me 10 rand or 20 rand and so, that is also regarded as work. In
Oh,
fact, begging at the robot is also regarded as work if you do it for at least 1 hour during a week. So it's not really an error in the labor statistics. It is based on the recommendation of the ILO, and this was changed in 2008. They adopted this. It's the same manual as at that time. And
okay.
so this
So
is that is the numbers behind this. And there's also more, but I will let you come in now. I will stop talking.
okay, yeah. When you talk about the ILO, you're referring to the International Labour Organization. They
Yeah,
have put
exactly.
down they've put down these rules and regulations,
Yeah,
or for the rest of the global economy to follow
yeah,
through. But it's very
yeah,
misleading. It's very misleading to encompass perhaps a beggar on the corner, and as you've indicated, playing your violin in a shopping center, whatever have you. We are looking for real, hard, tangible working solutions, or people in hands-on job 5 days a week. That would give us the true and the real picture. And then coming back to your figure of 132,000 people that are now in the workforce, or suggesting that 132,000 jobs have been created. Do they tell us whether they are permanent jobs, which sectors they're in terms of other benefits, medical aid, etc.? Because if that is all included, that does take a bit of a strain off our state health system as well. So all of that, I believe, should be factored in. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's really, as the informal sector in South Africa is very large, large. The employment numbers, it does include the numbers of so-called informal employment. It does do so. And when I spoke about the 132,000, Julie, then I spoke about that the actual numbers of unemployed has increased officially with
Ah,
132,000 people.
okay.
I mean,
Okay.
in the labor force now, you have about what is it? It is let me look in the table here. Uh, it is in the labor force you have 23,550 23 million people, 23.5 million people, but then also the so-called discouraged work seekers are not included here, and they are 3.5 million people who have given up looking for job. And that relates to this if you have the official unemployment rate, or if you have the expanded definition, which we prefer at AIDC, and many other observers also speak about an unemployment of 44.5%. But I mean, and you also have in the report, you have of course a division between different sectors. But it's one thing here that one should know. Well, there are many things, but one thing about the finance sector, the so-called finance sector. In the finance sector, you include labor broking, or you include sort of other businesses. You include debt collectors, for example. And you will see that in finance, you have an increase of employment of 128,000 people. Now, this finance employment, it is close to 2.5 million people. But I mean, in the banking sector, you only have about 170,000 people employed. And the trend there ever since 2018, because of technological development, is that
Mm,
banks are
mm,
closing their offices. So the
absolutely.
main part of this finance figure of 2.5 million employed, they are kind of in the labor broking industry or different kind of so-called other businesses. And I would guess that if you have an increase of as the banking sector is shedding jobs and not increasing employment, I would say that the increase by 128,000 employed in so-called finance, this is an increase in labor broking, which are not sort of medical aid jobs. As you know, these are very precarious jobs, and it's always an issue in the mining industry and others. There's always an opposition and a conflict about people who are employed by labor brokers on much worse condition than the permanent employees, than other employers. So I think that the situation, I mean, if you look behind the numbers, then one understands that the situation is nothing to cry hooray about. The situation is extremely,
Bleak. Bleak.
yeah, yeah, and and
Uh,
and
my final question to you: is there hope? Is there hope? What needs to happen to turn the economic situation around in the country?
Well, as I indicated when we started our conversation, I think that the so-called shutdown today, that is kind of, I think that is a, if you regard, as I do, as kind of like a, if you like, a socialist economist, or a person who is on the left, then I see as the only solution to this crisis is that the ordinary people are organized and coming together and talk to each other, because we have a breakup now of the social fabric in working class communities. Look at the murder statistics. look at the statistics over rape and the different kind of crimes. This has to stop. And I mean, it's only the majority of ordinary working people in the country. They are kind of like the solution to this problem. But then they also have to come together politically. And here I have hopes for the COSATU Congress. I think it's 2 weeks from now. The issue of the support to the ruling party, who have signed an agreement with the World Bank when they took these loans earlier this year and last year, the so-called country partnership framework. They are firmly on a route instead of having a massive jobs program for public jobs, to repair water pipes, to repair potholes, to rebuild schools, to sort of deal with the extreme rate of vacancies in public hospitals and clinics. They are on the trajectory, the government, to reduce employment in the public sector, because they believe in that the private sector will save us. And
Mm.
I think that this is a complete fallacy. I mean, what we see with this high unemployment rate, we see a devastating crisis in the public sector. We see a sort of almost a new stage of a breakup in the social fabric of the country. And you need to have a political sort of a political shift in the country from neoliberalism and from World Bank austerity to rely on if the private sector fails, then the public sector has to come in. And
Well,
you can't sort of loosen labor laws more. I mean, the labor laws are even not implemented. Everybody is speaking about
absolutely.
red tape. What kind of red
Right.
tape is really implemented among labor brokers? How many sliding door men and women in the taxi industry are working 8 hours per day? And to what salaries are they working? I mean, you need a complete shift of the economic and the macroeconomic framework. And here the public sector is a key to this. It's also a key when it comes to climate change. Uh, we
Absolutely.
can't, we can't hope for the private sector to save us from the climate crisis. They will only do it at the right price. And
Absolutely.
yeah. So that is
We have to,
basically what I'm looking for.
unfortunately, on that very bleak note, Dick, we need to leave it there. I just feel so despondent after talking with you this morning, and you
I'm
so
sorry
rightly
about that.
say, not your fault. I think the start to all of this is the rot in government. The corruption and the rot needs to stop, and only then will we be able to, you know, to see our way clear in healing this country and creating jobs and be where we ought to be. Truly, the jewel in Africa. But we've lost that position, and we need to work very hard in getting back to that spot. Senior economist Dr. Dick Forslund, thank you for being with us. Always a pleasure to talk to you. But as I've said, on that very despondent note, we have to end the interview now. I have two comments. Thank you for your time, Dr. Dick Forslund. Until the next time. Two comments that I'd like to read out to you. The one is from Amina Ibrahim. She says, it's time to stop talking and start acting. How to create employment. Take some of the grants and give the people in the townships brick building machines and raw materials to make bricks and sell to the government and build their own homes. Let's bring up the second message, and that's from Nizam Sheikh. Can we get it on the screen, please? All right, Nizam Sheikh is saying, very bleak indeed. Unlike the DA, who is hurraying about job creation in the Western Cape. So, those two comments from our listeners and viewers this morning. Let's move on. 19 after 9 o'clock, right here on News and Views on Salam Media.